When Vietnamese refugees arrived in the United States during the 1970s after the fall of Saigon, they carried with them very little material belongings, but a lifetime of culinary memories. Food became their bridge between the past they had lost and the uncertain future ahead. In refugee camps like Camp Pendleton, Fort Chaffee, Fort Indiantown, Gap, and Eglin Air Force Base, the earliest meals were basic government rations that Vietnamese families had to creatively modify to resemble dishes from home. This adaptation resulted in unique, resourceful, emotionally driven meals, simple, yet filled with cultural resilience. Below is a detailed exploration of 5 of the 25 meals Vietnamese refugees cooked, recreated, or improvised while adjusting to life in America. 1. Adapted fish sauce. Stir-fry enzyme XO fish sauce was extremely scarce in early refugee camps. Many refugees were handed soy sauce instead, which was unfamiliar to them. When real enzyme eventually became available through donated shipments or special deliveries from Asian community groups, families used it sparingly. They stretched it by mixing with water, sugar, and garlic to create a stir-fry base. Into this sauce they added whatever vegetables were available: cabbage, onions, carrots, celery, or canned green beans. Meat was often minimal, sometimes just a few slices of pork or chicken. This dish symbolized both longing and gratitude: longing for authentic flavors and gratitude for ingredients that could mimic home. 2. Camp-style pho. Tri tea and pho became a morale-lifting effort, even when families had almost none of the traditional components. Broth was made from donated beef bones or occasional soup bones from American military kitchens. Instead of rice noodles, which were rare, refugees sometimes used spaghetti broken into pieces. Herbs like basil or cilantro were replaced with parsley or whatever green leaves were available. The broth was seasoned with salt, soy sauce, and black pepper because star anise, cinnamon, and cloves were difficult to find. Though far from authentic, this improvised pho represented community spirit. Everyone in the camp would contribute something and share large pots among multiple families. 3. Canned meat rice bowl. Cm via that HPH. Early on, refugees were often given canned meats such as spam, luncheon loaf, or canned chicken. While these foods were unfamiliar, Vietnamese cooks learned to transform them into flavorful dishes. Spam was sliced thin, pan-fried until crispy, and served over rice with soy sauce, pickled carrots, and cucumbers. This dish became surprisingly popular with children because the salty, fatty flavors resembled certain Vietnamese street foods. Refugees frequently joked that spam saved lives because it was one of the few reliable protein sources available in abundance. 4. Vegetable soup with American greens. Can rau qm. Traditional Vietnamese soups rely on specific herbs and greens: Malabar spinach, water spinach, shallot leaves, mustard greens. In America, refugees had to use spinach, kale, collard greens, and even iceberg lettuce. The soup was usually made by boiling water with a bit of fish sauce, adding chopped greens, tomatoes, and sometimes tofu or small bits of ground pork. The result was a simple, comforting broth that reminded refugees of home. This soup also introduced many Americans and volunteers to Vietnamese cooking for the first time. 5. Peanut butter spring roll experiment. Refugees were often given peanut butter, something unfamiliar in Vietnam. Some families attempted to blend it into familiar dishes, using it as a dipping sauce for spring rolls. Because they had no hoisin sauce, they mixed peanut butter with water, sugar, soy sauce, and chili flakes to create a creamy dip. While not traditional, the flavor was surprisingly successful. Over time, this adaptation became a widely recognized version of Vietnamese peanut dipping sauce in the U.S. even though it originated from necessity rather than tradition. These meals illustrate the ingenuity of Vietnamese refugees who had to rebuild their culinary identity in a foreign land. The 1970s were a time of immense cultural adjustment, but food provided continuity, a way to preserve heritage, maintain hope, and introduce their cuisine to America. Each dish was more than sustenance. It was a story of survival, memory, and transformation. As Vietnamese refugees transitioned from temporary camps into American cities, their food journey evolved dramatically. Access to supermarkets, community donations, and early Asian grocery stores allowed them to experiment, recreate, and refine dishes they had longed for. Yet, many ingredients were still unavailable or too expensive. This forced creativity led to fusion-style meals unique to the refugee experience, blending American products with Vietnamese cooking traditions. Below are 5 more historically grounded examples showing this evolution. 6. Substitute bánh made with hot dog buns. The Vietnamese baguette was impossible to find in most U.S. towns during the 1970s. Refugees turned to inexpensive hot dog or hamburger buns as the next best option. They toasted them lightly to achieve a crisp exterior, filled them with pickled carrots, cucumbers, cilantro if available, and either cold cuts, fried eggs, or leftover meats. Mayonnaise replaced PT. While not authentic, this version of bánh became a practical survival food, easy to pack for work in factories or farms. 7. American chicken curry adaptation. Traditional Vietnamese curry repurposed includes lemongrass, coconut milk, and Asian spices, items that were initially unavailable. Refugees replaced lemongrass with lemon zest, coconut milk with evaporated milk, and curry spices with generic American curry powder. Potatoes, carrots, and chicken made the dish hearty and affordable. Served with rice or bread, this meal became a family favorite because it stretched ingredients over several days. 8. Stir-fried ramen noodles. Early, instant MXO. Instant ramen reached American shelves in the late 1960s and quickly became a staple for low-income families. Vietnamese refugees embraced it for its affordability and familiarity to Vietnamese noodle culture. They stir-fried softened ramen with cabbage, onions, soy sauce, and occasionally eggs or leftover meat. This became a comfort meal, especially for young adults studying or working long hours. 9. American vegetable pickles as a substitute for cua. Traditional Vietnamese pickles used daikon and carrots, but daikon was difficult to find in many states. Refugees used whatever pickling vegetables were available: cucumbers, green beans, cauliflower, or plain carrots. Vinegar replaced rice vinegar. Sugar and salt remained essential. These pickles were stored in reused jars and served with rice, soups, and sandwiches, preserving a vital part of Vietnamese flavor identity. 10. Tofu and cabbage hot pot. Lu tofu thi bao cp. Hot pot was a communal meal that allowed families to stretch small amounts of protein by cooking everything in one shared pot. Tofu became an inexpensive, widely available protein source. Cabbage, celery, onions, and mushrooms formed the broth base, seasoned with soy sauce, pepper, and garlic. Families gathered around the pot, echoing memories of Vietnam's shared dining culture, reinforcing unity during difficult times. These meals marked the second phase of the refugee culinary story, adaptation through accessibility. They demonstrate resourcefulness, resilience, and the desire to maintain cultural identity while embracing new surroundings. By the mid-1970s, Vietnamese refugee communities began forming in cities like Houston, Orange County, Arlington, New Orleans, and San Jose. Asian markets slowly emerged, run by entrepreneurs within the refugee population. With more familiar ingredients, families were finally able to recreate dishes much closer to those in Vietnam. However, financial limitations meant ingredients were still rationed or adapted. Below are 5 more meals representing this transitional period. 11. Real bánh made with American flour. Vietnamese crepe bánh traditionally uses rice flour and turmeric, but both were hard to find. Refugees improvised with all-purpose flour, cornstarch, and food coloring for the yellow hue. Fillings included bean sprouts, onions, pork scraps, or shrimp if affordable. Lettuce was substituted for mustard greens. While slightly heavier than traditional bánh, the flavor and crackling texture captured the essence of the original. 12. Clay pot-style caramelized fish. See Coty. Vietnamese braised fish requires clay pots, which most families didn't have. They used metal pots or deep pans instead. Catfish, abundant and inexpensive in the U.S., became the preferred fish. Fish sauce, sugar, scallions, ginger, and black pepper formed the caramelized sauce. This dish reminded refugees of family meals in the Mekong Delta and became a staple in many southern Vietnamese households. 13. Vietnamese coffee with American tools. Without a fin filter, refugees brewed strong coffee using drip machines or stovetop percolators. They mixed it with sweetened condensed milk, which was accessible and affordable. Even though the brewing method differed, the taste resembled CPH saw from home. This became a cultural anchor for many adults trying to rebuild their morning routines in a new country. 14. American pork chops with Vietnamese marinade. Refugees applied traditional marinades, fish sauce, garlic, sugar, lemongrass or lemon zest, and pepper to inexpensive American pork chops. Grilled or pan-fried, the result tasted distinctly Vietnamese. Served with rice and pickles, this fusion dish symbolized how Vietnamese culinary identity survived despite different ingredients. 15. Herbal chicken soup with local greens. This dish used whole chicken, simmered with onions, ginger, and black pepper. Traditional Vietnamese herbs were replaced with parsley, celery leaves, or even wild greens foraged from local areas. The soup was comforting, affordable, and deeply nostalgic, especially for elders longing for medicinal Vietnamese broths. This batch showcases how refugees regained culinary autonomy, blending authenticity and adaptation as communities strengthened. As the refugee population grew more financially stable, more traditional dishes re-entered the community. Weddings, celebrations, and religious gatherings became opportunities to cook elaborate meals reminiscent of Vietnam. Even so, substitutions remained common due to availability, cost, or regional differences. Here are 5 more dishes representing Vietnamese resilience and celebration. 16. B&B Hue reconstruction. This spicy beef noodle soup required lemongrass, shrimp paste, annatto oil, and round rice noodles. Refugees often replaced lemongrass with bottled lemongrass extract or lemon zest. Shrimp paste was substituted with anchovy paste. Annatto oil was replaced with paprika mixed in oil. Despite these substitutions, the broth maintained its rich and invigorating flavor. This dish was often cooked during community potlucks. 17. Vietnamese fried chicken with fish sauce glaze. Refugees discovered that American fried chicken paired exceptionally well with NCM. They created a glaze using fish sauce, sugar, and chili, then coated fried chicken with it. This fusion dish became popular among children and eventually inspired versions in Vietnamese restaurants decades later. 18. Rice paper rolls with local vegetables. When rice paper became available through Asian markets, families celebrated by making GI con again. Lacking Asian herbs, they used lettuce, parsley, cabbage, and blanched spinach. Protein included shrimp, sliced pork, or tofu. Dipping sauces, both peanut and fish sauce based, were adapted with available American products. This dish became symbolic of Vietnamese identity. 19. Sweet corn pudding dessert. BPM Vietnamese desserts often rely on tropical ingredients like pandan, cassava, or taro. Refugees adapted by making sweet corn pudding using canned corn, coconut milk, sugar, and tapioca pearls. This dessert became widely loved because the ingredients were cheap and easy to find. 20. Fried rice using American frozen vegetables. American supermarkets sold affordable frozen mixed vegetables, peas, carrots, corn, green beans. These became the base for Vietnamese-style fried rice. Leftover rice was stir-fried with garlic, eggs, soy sauce, and small bits of meat. This dish fed large families efficiently and became a weekly staple. This batch highlights the creativity of refugees who preserved cultural celebrations even in difficult circumstances. By the late 1970s, Vietnamese cuisine had started influencing American food culture. Refugees opened small restaurants, bakeries, and markets, allowing access to more authentic cooking ingredients. These establishments helped preserve culture and introduced American communities to new flavors. The final section of this series presents the last 5 meals, reflecting this cultural integration and entrepreneurial spirit. 21. Traditional bánh chain made with American ingredients. Making bánh chain required glutinous rice, mung beans, pork belly, and banana leaves. Since banana leaves were hard to find, refugees used aluminum foil or parchment to wrap the cakes. Mung beans were available in specialty stores, and pork belly became more accessible. Families gathered during Lunar New Year to prepare this symbolic dish, keeping traditions alive for future generations. 22. Vietnamese meatloaf. Turng HPH, influenced by American meatloaf. Refugees adapted the American concept of meatloaf by mixing ground pork with fish sauce, mushrooms, noodles, and eggs. Steamed instead of baked, the dish stayed moist and fragrant. This fusion gained popularity in family meals because it was economical and familiar enough for children growing up in America. 23. Vietnamese shrimp and grits in southern U.S. states. Refugees encountered grits, a new staple. They combined sautéed shrimp with garlic, fish sauce, scallions, and black pepper, serving it over grits instead of rice porridge. The result was a flavorful fusion dish that blended Southern comfort with Vietnamese seafood traditions. 24. American turkey with Vietnamese stuffing. During Thanksgiving, Vietnamese families adopted the holiday but infused it with their culinary heritage. They stuffed turkey with sticky rice mixed with Chinese sausage, mushrooms, scallions, and fish sauce. The flavor combination was uniquely Vietnamese-American and became an annual tradition. 25. Vietnamese American seafood gumbo in Louisiana. Vietnamese fishermen adapted gumbo by adding fish sauce, lemongrass, and rice noodles instead of standard accompaniments. This dish became a multicultural masterpiece, blending Cajun techniques with Vietnamese flavor profiles. It symbolizes the ultimate culinary integration journey of refugees. These final meals represent not just survival, but evolution, a blending of cultures that enriched both Vietnamese communities and American food culture. Each dish carries stories of hardship, adaptation, innovation, and identity.